Hi, I am Jonny John. So today I want to talk more about the self, so that you can understand how the mind works. In particular, I want to talk about self-rejection. Remember, all forms of all your sufferings, including your fears, your anger, your negativities, are all caused by this state of self-rejection. So today I want to explore this state further to understand why this state of self-rejection creates suffering states of the mind, so that you can understand the importance of developing self-acceptance, so that you can transform this state of self-rejection to transform your suffering states of the mind. Before we move forward, let us do a quick recap on what negative ideas are. So the seed cause for all forms of suffering states of the mind come from negative ideas. Negative ideas are ideas we have inside which promote self-rejection. These can be simplified and understood as self-declarations beginning with "it is not okay." For instance, it's not okay to fail. It is not okay to be arrogant. It's not okay to be angry. And when you become attached to negative ideas, for instance, it is not okay to fail, when this negative idea is triggered, for example, by an outer experience, when you fail or when other people fail, all levels of the self will experience it a bit differently. For instance, the physical self will experience it as negative physical sensations on the body. The mental self will experience it as negative thoughts. The emotional self as negative emotions. The totality of this experience is called suffering, and this is experienced all at once because there's no separation from within. So negative ideas are the seed cause for all your unhappiness, for your negativities, for all your fears. In this video, I would like to go deeper into the topic of suffering as to why the state of self-rejection can promote such a negative state. Remember, in the previous video, we talked about what the self is. We are in essence consciousness energy. So if you look within yourself, you will realize that there are no parts of yourself, which is not you. And the more you develop self-awareness, the more you will realize that to the deeper mind, there's only one truth, that there's only one self. And because there's only one self, all is the self. Here in the deeper mind, there's no argument whether the mental self, the emotional self, the physical self are all separate. They are all one self. And along your journey of self-knowing, you will gradually realize that this truth also applies to everything which exists outside of us. The objects we use, the people we see, the animals, everything which exists in the universe is the self. Now naturally, if we all lived according to this truth of being in a state of acceptance inwards and outwards towards everything around us, we'd be in a state of pure harmony and happiness, the state of nirvana. But this is not the case because we have the ability to make choices, to distort the truth. Instead of being in a state of self-acceptance, we can be in a state of rejection towards this person, towards ourselves, towards that experience. We can say, that person is stupid, so we don't like them. We can self-judge ourselves for failing in a business plan. And when this happens, it sends a wave of confusion through all levels of the self, because it's much like saying to the person you see in the mirror, "You are not part of me. I don't like that part. You shouldn't be there." And this confusion is perceived as the state of suffering, as unhappiness. So, you can understand that the state of suffering is an experience when you distort the truth. Now, the things that I've been saying can be a bit confusing, but don't worry too much about it. You will gradually realize this from your own experience the further you go along your journey. Right now, let us think of the way to put this information into practical use. We now know that the state of self-rejection is the seed cause for all forms of suffering states of the mind. We now realize that it's important to develop self-acceptance. And because now we know that to the deeper mind there's only one self, we can use these two pieces of information together to accelerate our journey of self-transformation. So when you develop self-acceptance, you have to direct it not just one way, but both ways. For instance, anger cannot be transformed if you only direct forgiveness, self-acceptance in one direction. For instance, you won't be making much progress if you only learn how to forgive others, but not yourself. And also, because there's only one self to the deeper mind, you can use this information to understand your suffering states of the mind. You can use this information to understand more about you. For instance, when you find yourself hating a person because they are arrogant, realize that it's because you also hate that part of yourself. For instance, if you find it awkward to see someone talking to a stranger at a bus stop, most likely you will feel the same way if you did the same thing as well. So everything you perceive on the outside will always come back to you. It will always be about you. So in summary, to the deeper mind, there's only one truth, that there's only one self. And because there's only one self, all is the self. When this truth becomes distorted, then there will be suffering. When there's self-rejection, there's the distortion of the truth. So to transform the suffering states of the mind, we have to develop self-acceptance. This is the most important. So when you find yourself in hatred or in rejection of an experience or other people within, realize the importance of self-acceptance. That's how you transform the suffering states of the mind.